Hello everyone, welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Stef Wolfe, and today I'm going to be learning with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. And in today's case, it is definitely going to be one that's a bit different. It's going to be a spiky friend of ours, because we are covering the oh-so-wonderful Echidna. This, of course, is a very, very special listener episode dedicated to Alicia, Terry, Chloe, Jody, Kirsty, and to Ava. Thank you all for taking the time to write into the show and for the wonderful suggestion. For how you can request your very own animal episode and for all of the facts used in this one, you can either wait till the end or you can go into the description or the show notes where all of that information is there. If you would like exclusive episodes and also to support the show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/relaxwithanimalfacts, or you can just click the link that is also in the show notes. And now we are going to begin to slow down a little bit. As always, I have only 3 exhortations to you before we start our adventure. The first is that you put on your favorite pair of boots. If you don't have any of your own, don't worry, we supply them here. The second is to notice perhaps where you are carrying some tension. It can be challenging to relax when we're stiff as a board, and so what I encourage you to do is to notice where that tension is. It might be in the hands or in the head, in the shoulders, and do your best to impersonate Jell-O. And when I mean impersonate that Jell-O, I mean go for an Oscar award-winning performance. Simply, we do not need any of that tension where we are going today. And my third and last exhortation to you is to allow your mind to wander and journey with me into the grasslands of mainland Australia where the Echidna resides. This is not our first rodeo in this part of the world, because Australia happens to harbor some of the most unique creatures on the planet. And so notice the scenery of what most Australians would probably call the bush. We have this beautiful natural mosaic of the greens and the tawny yellows and browns. We can hear the brittleness of the sticks and twigs beneath our feet, and I am not sure you have noticed this before, but in each place we go, there is always some kind of orchestra playing, whether that be the birds or the locusts, the swaying trees or the rustling leaves. Nowhere on planet Earth are we exempt from a wonderful concert being played continually. Whether it is nighttime or daytime, there is always something for the ears. So now, as we are walking here in the grasslands, what we are looking for is a very special creature. Their common name is the Echidna, but their scientific name is Tachyglossus aculeatus. As always, we can decipher a little bit about the creature from their scientific name. The word tachyglossus can be broken down into 2 root words, glossus and tachy, which when combined together mean something like fast-tongued. That second word, aculeatus, means something that is prickly or barbed or having kind of an edge. You'll notice that at the beginning of that word, aculeatus, is the word acu. That word is used in acupuncture because acu means needle. And so here we have some sort of fast-tongued, prickly, or barbed creature. And boy, is that an apt distinction. Now, the reason we are walking around in Australia today is not just because Aussies are cool, but because echidnas can only be found in Australia and New Guinea. The echidna, apart from their scientific name, is also known as the spiny anteater, and for good reason. They are mammals, which, remember, have certain characteristics. Mammals are creatures that are warm-blooded, have fur, nurse their young with milk, and typically give birth to live young. But the echidna is a rare exception. While they are considered mammals, they actually lay eggs. This creature is one of the reasons why, if you Google definitions of mammal, that when it comes to giving birth to live young, it will usually have an often or typically they do this because it's not 100% of the time. They are also placed into categories based on if they are long or short-beaked, even though the echidna does not actually have a beak at all, at least not in the traditional sense that we understand beaks. That beak is referring to a fleshy nose that they have that can be either longer or shorter. And in addition to all of this quirkiness, they are absolutely covered with barbless, hollow quills. Now, the reason why a creature like a porcupine, for example, has such an effective defense is because they have quills that are indeed barbed. These barbed quills makes it very difficult to remove them from the skin and impossible to remove them without some kind of pain. The echidna, on the other hand, has barbless quills. Echidnas are considered monotremes, and this specific group only has one other creature in it, and that is the audacious platypus. Monotremes just describe egg-laying mammals, so the echidna and the platypus break the researchers out in a sweat that try to place them into clean categories. So the echidna and the platypus work together in order to break every researcher into a sweat as they fumble around trying to classify them in many of the senses which we know, and even making changes to the definition of a mammal as to include some very small exceptions to make room for these two unique creatures. The echidna can grow from between 14 to 30 inches, which is about 35.5 to 76 centimeters long, and they can weigh from between 5.5 to 22 pounds, around 2.5 to 10 kilograms. And each of their prickly spines can grow up to 2 inches or about 5 centimeters long. And so we can often get a good look at the echidna, but not for long periods of time. This is because while they are very active during the day and during the night, these habitats can be very, very warm. Some would even say smoldering hot. And so while often they will come out onto the ground and search for prey, they will often shelter themselves from the extreme heat in caves or in burrows. And echidnas share something with the platypus in that while they are warm-blooded, they do have unusually low body temperatures that will vary from between 84 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 29 to 32 degrees Celsius. Now, the average body temperature of a person is about 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius, and so we can see how large of a gap this is. Their body works best at this heat, and they cannot tolerate really high temperatures, and so will seek refuge in the shade. Now, there are 4 different echidna species that can be distinguished by their spines, by the number of claws that they have on their feet, and by the length and shape of their beaks. Remember that when we say beak, we are referring to that little fleshy nose. Now, one really cool fact is that embedded into the skin of the beak of the echidna are electroreceptors. Now, on this show, there is really only one other creature I can think of that we have covered with electroreceptors, and that was a kind of shark. But the echidna has up and decided that it wants electroreceptors too. Researchers postulate that the echidna may sense electrical signals that are produced by the muscles of invertebrate prey. We may forget or we may not know how much of our body relies on this kind of electrical impulse. Our hearts, for example, beat as they beat because of electrical impulses. Our body is something like an unassailably complex computer filled with connections and impulses, and the electroreceptors on the skin of the beak of the echidna gives it a huge advantage in prey detection. Now, one thing that the echidna has that it shares also with the platypus are spurs on their hind legs. Spurs are these appendages that are very sharp. The platypus and the echidna, however, use their spurs for different reasons. Male platypuses, if we remember from the platypus episode, will use their spurs as weapons to deliver venom. They will use it when they are competing against other males of the same species during breeding season. The male echidnas will not use their spurs for any sort of war. Instead of acting as a venomous device, their spurs produce a substance that likely serves as a form of scent communication. So while the echidna talks it out, the platypus decides to go for violence. And the fact that the echidna does not use their spur in this way is reflected also in their behavior. While they are very solitary animals, they are not at all territorial. They seem very willing to share their home range with others of their kind and will not try to drive others out. But, as I mentioned, they are solitary, and they will hibernate specifically during the cold winter months in burrows that they will not share, say, with other males. So while they are not territorial, they are certainly still solitary. Echidnas do not have teeth and will survive on a strict diet of termites, ants, and other little invertebrates that they can find in the soil. Beetle larvae seems to be for them something like chocolate cake. When they want to treat themselves, they will eat beetle larvae. The strong claws that they have on their limbs will allow them to break open logs and get to those yummy termites inside. Their tongues are very long, seeing as they are considered to be a spiky anteater, and they will use those long tongues to scoop up large bunches of termites that can be lodged up to 7 inches or 18 centimeters below where they are. Their tongues are quite long, and so their tongue plays a very key role in their diet and their ability to hunt. The echidna actually has no teeth, and so they will use their tongue and the bottom of their mouth as a kind of mortar and pestle to grind up their food before they swallow it. If the echidna was to somehow chase a rogue termite, it would definitely be able to keep up. They can reach top speeds of 15 miles per hour, which when you look at the creature, you would not necessarily think that they could go that fast, but indeed they can. But while they can run a little bit faster than what they look like they can run, their main defensive option is to hide. When there are larger animals, or if they face any other kind of danger, they will hide in piles of leaves or grasses or make their way into some underground burrow. While they certainly would not be the easiest animal to eat for other larger predators, they certainly do not take the chance. But in addition to their ability of being able to run quickly, they are also great swimmers. They will occupy the waters mostly to groom themselves and to bathe, but nonetheless they do the doggy paddle just fine. And their quills, which if we remember are not barbed, are actually pretty sharp. These quills are quite hard because they are made of keratin, which is the same material that makes up hair and claws and fur. And these keratin proteins will harden into those familiar spikes that we know and love, and they will serve as protection from harsh conditions and from predators in the area. And their ability to dig is also supplemented by their large claws and their broad feet. They have something like flippers for dirt. Their front feet will have 5 claws that can be used to dig through the dirt and the leaves around them, while their hind feet face backwards and kick the soil away from the burrow as they dig. So they have 2 hind legs for cleanup or for disposal and 2 legs for active digging. This makes them an efficient and productive little critter. Now, as we learned before, when the baby echidnas are born, they are born in eggs. and the female echidna usually will lay a single egg at a time. And after one of these eggs has been laid, the mother will transfer the egg to a pouch that she has on her stomach. After a very short process of only about 10 to 11 days, the baby echidna, which is called a puggle, which I think is great, will come out of the egg into the wonderful world. After the baby echidna or the puggle is born, it will either go with the mother in the pouch or remain in the burrow while the mother searches for food. The baby echidna will not have their quills fully formed. Instead, their skin will be very soft and smooth, and their claws, instead of having that quality of very sharp and rough, will be small and fragile. But after several months, they will take the appearance of the echidna that most of us know. So the burrows that the female echidnas build become effectively nurseries. The mother will continue to return with food until it is time for the baby puggle to live on their own. In terms of lifespan, I found some conflicting information. Some articles said that the echidna can live up to 16 years in the wild, and other articles said that in captivity, echidnas can live up to 50 years, or possibly about 45 years in the wild. It is possibly because there simply is more research to be done, and so there is some conflicting information. But regardless, whether it is 16 years or 50 years, they are both substantial lifespans given their relative size and their habitat. Before we move on to the charity, let us just say where the name echidna comes from, or what does it mean. So as early as the 1810s is when we started defining the echidna as an Australian egg-laying hedgehog-like mammal. There is a direct Greek word which is echidna, which means snake or viper. Then we must ask ourselves, why exactly was this word ascribed to the echidna? It certainly does not look like a snake or a viper. Some say that it is perhaps a reference to how they eat, in the sense of their tongue being very long and slithery like a snake. The word could also come from the Latin root echinus, or the Greek word echinos, which means sea urchin. That makes more sense to some who say that, of course, sea urchins are quite spiky, and the echidna is just as spiky. And one cool fact is that the early naturalists, when they looked on the echidna, doubted whether it was a mammal or an amphibian. That is super cool. And moving on to the charity of this episode is the Sydney Wildlife Rescue. I know I will probably get emails for how I am saying Sydney, but I am not sure how the Aussies say it. I am aware of Melbourne, but that's about it. But the Sydney Wildlife Rescue is dedicated to protecting the native wildlife there, and they even gave some advice for what to do if you are ever to come upon an echidna that is out of its way. So I am going to read some of the rescue advice in case you ever come across one. If you find an injured echidna, you can pick it up in a bucket or in some sort of a closed box and take them to a vet, or you can even contact the local wildlife group. As we learned before, they have a fairly low body temperature that doesn't tolerate heat very well, so placing the rescued echidna in some sort of box wrapped in some kind of artificial heat is not good. They say cool is the rule as regards echidnas. The Sydney Wildlife Rescue also says, never remove an echidna from its territory unless it is in imminent danger, because you may be taking a mother away from her burrow where the young is dependent upon her. It is possible that she will not be able to find her way back using scent trails, and so displacing a mother is not a great thing to do. But you can go to the Sydney Wildlife Rescue and make a donation if you so choose. I am placing all of that information in the description. And now let us move on to the review portion of the show, where Candace is writing all the way from the United States of America. And Candace writes, I am so glad I found this podcast. It has helped me so much. The narrator's voice is so soothing and comforting. The content is stimulating enough to keep my mind occupied, but it's delivered like a lullaby. I love listening to this podcast to help me relax and slip into sleep. I have really bad insomnia due to chronic pain and wake up repeatedly through the night. The podcast does wonders in helping me relax and get back to sleep when this happens. Plus, I've been learning so much about the animal kingdom, which has always been one of my special interests. I'd love to hear more about specific frog species, rain frogs if possible, because frogs are my favorite animal. Happy face. Thank you, Candace, for taking the time to leave a review, and to leave a review with such an abundance of kind words. I am so happy that the podcast can be of any help to you at all, and I am also glad that you found the podcast in the first place. I'm grateful that you enjoy the show as you do, and I thank you also for a great suggestion of the rain frog. If the show has helped you in any way and you would like to give back to the show, leaving a review is one of the fastest and most generous ways to help the show grow. By leaving a review, you help the show get better, you can tell me what you like or don't like about it, and ultimately you help more people find the show, and so growing our animal podcast family. If you would like to have your very own episode, you can request an animal by going to relaxwithanimalfacts.com and clicking on the Animal Request tab. If you wish to contact me in any other way, you can either send a message to Relax with Animal Facts on Instagram, or you can send an email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com. For exclusive episodes and to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/relaxwithanimalfacts, or just click on the Patreon link in the show notes. The resources that were used in this episode are livescience.com, factanimal.com, britannica.com, and etimonline.com. All of those resources are available in the description of this episode, and this episode would not have been possible without their contributions. I encourage all of you, if you so choose, to go and explore those resources to your heart's content. What an amazing creature we have learned about today. Of course, this is Australia, so what could we expect? I always love going here to learn about new creatures. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.